Welcome to Odd's Bodkins Curiosity Shop, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear. There's nothing here that bites. Hard, anyway. Hello there. So delighted to see you return to Odd's Bodkins Curiosity Shop. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today we've got a curious item. I've taken the liberty of pulling this out. I laid out a fine velvet cloth on the display glass as we've set this down, and if you'll take a look at it, it is a crucifix. It is silver in material, and if you'll notice some of the fine details, while this has been polished, you can still see little areas of tarnish. You'll find areas where you might even see a little scoring, maybe from fire damage. And is that a hint of blood I notice over there on the edge? Yes, this is a crucifix used in many Catholic rites and in many Catholic exorcisms. And therein lies the crux of today's episode of Odd's Bodkins Curiosity Shop. So let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new film, The Pope's Exorcist. So first off, I want to say sorry that we did not have any episodes last week. Of course, coming off the Easter holiday, I really thought this movie, The Pope's Exorcist, was coming out the Friday before Easter, Good Friday. I don't know if that's originally how they planned it, but they thought better of it because of Easter and moved it to this past Friday, the 14th. I'm not sure where the confusion, whether it was on my part or maybe some rescheduling, but at any rate, there really wasn't any big movies that came out last week. They're the week of Easter, and there were no shows wrapping up, so I really didn't have anything to talk about. So instead of trying to scrounge and find something to talk about and just talking for talking's sake, which is something I am prone to do, just ask my friends and family and my dear wife. She catches the brunt of all my jabbering. But at any rate, I decided to take a little break, take a little, not a vacation, but just take some time off to kind of recalibrate where I'm going with some things with the podcast. And I decided, this week we're going to come back strong. Monday, today, when you hear this episode, or at least when it's first made available, we're going to be talking about The Pope's Exorcist. Coming up on Thursday's episode, we're going to be talking about the new horror comedy Renfield. So some big movies that are coming out, and we've got a lot of big things coming up moving forward. The Mandalorian's coming to an end this week, and lots of things to talk about. And like I said, we've got some new features we're working on. So just I kind of took the week off last week to kind of get my bearings of where we're going in the not too distant future, while I had a little bit of downtime, but was really excited about this movie coming out, The Pope's Exorcist, because, I mean, let's be honest, if you've seen one exorcism movie, you've probably seen most all of them. The thing that really interested me about this is that it had Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe, to my knowledge, I mean, without going through his IMDb filmography, I don't know as if he's done any, if very many horror films. I can't think of any horror films that Russell Crowe has done, and I'm guessing this may be his first horror film. So the fact that you've got Russell Crowe attached to this was interesting. The idea that this is relatively based on maybe not a true story, but a true figure. Father Gabriel Amorth. He's actually a priest in the Catholic Church and served as the exorcist for the Diocese of Rome through the 80s until his death in 2016. So it's based off the books he wrote or were written about him. So there's a little bit of historical fact to this, and I use fact in air quotes, but that was interesting to me. And the whole idea of having an exorcist that is at the behest of the Pope himself was something that we've never tread into those waters with exorcism movies. So there was a lot of interesting things that made this something I wanted to watch, in spite of the fact that I was pretty sure it was going to be full of all of the exorcism movie tropes that we've come to expect and that we've come to get with many exorcism movies over the past, I don't know, however many years since The Exorcist came out in the 70s. So the basic crux of this movie is you've got this family that has moved to Castile, Spain from the United States. Julia, she's the mother, played by Alex Esso. Amy, played by Laura Marsden. She is the eldest daughter. And then the younger son, Henry, played by Henry D'Souza Figoni. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But the recently deceased husband of Julia, he passed away a year ago in a car accident that Henry was involved in and witnessed his father dying. He had in his family inherited a huge abbey. It used to be a Catholic abbey. Now it's kind of just run down and dilapidated in Spain. He left them with no money. They have no money. So they're banking on fixing up this old Spanish abbey and selling it. And that way they can move back to the United States and they can survive as a family. But they move there and the young son, Henry, becomes possessed. Of course, this is all in the trailer, so it's not really spoiler territory. And then you have this Father Gabriel Amarth who comes in to perform this exorcism. And while, like I said, and if you've heard anybody talk about this movie, you've heard them talk about the fact that it really breaks no new ground in the way of how exorcism movies go. You get a lot of the same tropes that you get in almost every exorcism movie. Like I said, since the Exorcist came out there in the 70s, you get somebody, walking on all fours and contorting around. You get a head spinning around. You've got spit up blood. You've got a little kid saying some of the worst foul-mouthed things. That I was quite surprised and pleasantly surprised that they didn't hold back with any of that stuff, because in this day and age where everybody is offended about something, I figured they'd kind of hold back on the demon talking through this kid and saying some of the worst things possible. I mean, they really went for it with the Reagan character and Linda Blair in the Exorcist. This probably went, if not that far, almost that far, with this child Henry saying these horrible things to his mother and grabbing her boob. Spoiler alert, he grabs her boob and he does call her a fat cow, which I was like, oh man, I called my mom that. I had to get my mouth jack slapped. But at any rate, they went for it with that, which I really appreciated. But a lot of the things you see in this are elements and tropes of exorcism stories that you've seen every other one do. And that to me was a little bit one of the few disappointments I had with this movie. And I'll say it right off the bat before we get into some spoiler territory. I really did enjoy this movie. This was a good movie. Was it a great movie? No. Was it The Exorcist reincarnate? No. But I enjoyed it for all of the things that it did have that you haven't got in some recent exorcism movies, and that has nothing to do with the exorcism plot to the movie. Now, you're going to have to keep listening to find out what I'm talking about, and I'm sorry, but we are going to have some spoilers, because I can't talk about this movie without really diving into it and talking about it no holds barred. So if you haven't watched The Pope's Exorcist, go watch it. Check it out in theaters right now. Or if you're listening to this podcast later, rent it, or wherever you can stream it. Do that. Watch the movie and then come back and hear my thoughts on it. And maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't agree. If you don't care about spoilers and you just want to find out a little more about this movie to see whether you're even going to watch it or not, and you don't care about spoilers, then we're going to truck on. And if you have watched this movie, sit back and I'll talk about my thoughts on it, and we'll see how they jibe with what you thought about this movie. But from here on out, there are going to be spoilers. So first off, we're going to talk about the characters in this film. And there aren't a ton, at least as far as main characters. You get a lot of secondary and tertiary characters that really don't play a whole lot into the story. I mean, they could have cut a lot of that out and you'd still get the gist of the story and the story almost in its entirety without some of these side characters, like the Pope, like the Bishop Lumumba character, like the little, I can't remember which bishop or which cardinal he was, but the snotty American young guy. he was kind of a prick, and you really could do without that character, because it really didn't have a whole lot of bearing on the story in and of itself. But we're going to focus mainly on the 5 primary characters that we have in this. And I'm going to talk first and foremost about Russell Crowe as Father Gabriel Amorth. Now, you're going to hear it pronounced several different ways in the movie. Amorth. I don't know. I'm just pronouncing it how I pronounce it, and I'll probably change how I pronounce it 15 times throughout this podcast. But Father Gabriel Amorth is an actual, like I said, Catholic priest. He served as the exorcist of the Diocese of Rome, essentially the Pope's exorcist from the mid-80s through to his death in 2016. And we catch this story, I believe it starts I think it's like right around 87, I believe it says. You get some title cards on the screen telling you dates and things like that. And I believe this starts in 86, 87. But this Father Gabriel Amorth, he actually wrote several books on his time as a exorcist for the Vatican. He wrote An Exorcist Tells His Story, which was published in 99, An Exorcist, More Stories, published in 2002, An Exorcist Explains the Demonic, The Antics of Satan and His Army of Fallen Angels, which was published in 2016, probably right around the time of his death, or maybe just after his death. And then, of course, The Devil is Afraid of Me, The Life and Works of the World's Most Popular Exorcist, which was published here recently, a couple years ago in 2020. None of these books I have read, but, after watching this movie and seeing a representation of this real life character on the screen, it makes me interested and to see what his life was like as an exorcist, at the behest of the Pope. So really interested to read more about this character. But Russell Crowe plays this character, Father Gabriel Amorth. He is an exorcist, and the first scene we get with him is quite interesting because you get to see how he kind of maybe not changed the game of exorcism, but he really took into account more than just some of these, I'm sure there's a lot of charlatans out there that would just, do an exorcism and say they vanquished the devil, and it really had nothing to do with demonic possession. And that's what you get in that first scene where the young Italian man is claiming to be possessed, and Russell Crowe as Gabriel Amorth, he is questioning him, and you can tell that he sees something in this young man who's claiming to be possessed that just something isn't right. He brings in the pig. Farmer brings a pig, and he challenges the young man, supposedly possessed by Satan himself, to possess this pig, much like the story from the Bible where Jesus drives the demon, I believe Legion, into the herd of pigs, and then the pigs run off a cliff, killing themselves. But he challenges this young man who claims to be possessed by Satan, challenges Satan to possess this pig, and as soon as things look like maybe the pig is possessed, the pig squeals, and then the farmer blows its brains out. Quite a gory and gross scene. But then we find out that this kid wasn't possessed by the devil. Father Amorth, he knew that, and he just was using a little bit of psychology to get this kid to essentially stop pretending like he was possessed. And that, I think, was probably one of the interesting things about this character. The fact that, 98%, I believe, of the quote unquote exorcisms he performs, it's just people need somebody to listen to them or need somebody to talk to. And he understands that not everyone who claims to be possessed is possessed, but that 2%, well, that is the pure evil that hides in the bowels of the earth and the dark and shadowy places of the earth. And that 2% is what he knows to be real exorcism and real evil that he is battling. But it really like this character because you get a bit of backstory. And I think that's probably one of the things that I liked about this, because in so many of these exorcism movies, the exorcism, it's kind of a 50-50. It's, you get a little about the possessed and you get a little bit about the exorcist, and you find more and more about them. And this really, the child Henry who is possessed, we know a little bit about him. We know a little bit about his family, but it's just enough to get you to care about what happens to them. This movie is really about the titular character, the Pope's exorcist. This movie is about Father Gabriel Amorth. And in him, you get to learn a lot about this character's past. Not a ton, but you get enough to understand who he is and why he is who he is. You get to understand the fact that he was a soldier. Well, not a soldier, but he was a part of the resistance in Italy, fighting the fascists and the Nazis during World War II, and how he saw all his friends gunned down by a German, and he should have died, but he didn't. And the guilt he felt about that, the guilt he felt about a young woman who claimed to be possessed, and he knew she wasn't possessed. She just had mental health issues, and he just kind of pawned her off on some doctors, and was just never really treated the way she should have been treated, and ended up committing suicide in front of his very eyes, and how that affected him, and how that affected how he treated the possessed as well as the non-possessed. And that was really kind of interesting. And I thought that was a really cool revelation later in the movie when he's talking about this woman that he kind of neglected because he wasn't there for her. She wasn't possessed, so he didn't feel like he had anything that he could offer her, and just pawned her off on the doctors. And of course she killed herself, but she killed herself because the mental problems she was having dealt back to sexual abuse amongst the Catholic Church. And I thought that was an interesting way to subtly talk about that issue and bring to light how I'm sure a lot of Catholic priests who have never touched anyone, who are good men, have had that brought into their mindset of, I should have done more. I should have paid attention more. I should have spoke out. And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of bring those issues into this story about a Catholic priest and the Catholic Church. And there's things later talking about the atrocities of the Catholic Church during the Grand Inquisition that they delve into a little later. And we'll talk about that when we get to that point. But the Father Gabriel Amorth character in this, I thought is really interesting, and it's a complex character, but not overly complex. It's multifaceted, but this is a character that is very comfortable. This character knows his faith. When one of this other priest, actually it's Bishop Lumumba, he says that when it comes their time to stand in judgment, that he will defend Father Gabriel. And Father Gabriel replies that I don't need my faith defended. I am very, he's very sure of his faith, and that, he doesn't need anybody to defend the things he's done in the name of God. But I also like this character because this character has a seriousness about him. He takes his job serious, what he does serious, because it is a serious matter when you're dealing with possession, when you're dealing with demons and the powers and principalities of demonic possession. It's very serious stuff, but I don't know if the man, Father Gabriel, in real life was like this, but the portrayal by Russell Crowe of these little kind of one-off lines, these little jokey, sarcastic lines that he gives, just added a bit of levity to this without being overly jokey. It's not like your typical setup and punchline jokes. It's just little comments he makes. And I think in a lesser actor, these jokes don't land at all, or they are just a little too over the top and a little too funny, or at least a little too somebody trying to be funny, an actor trying to be funny and deliver funny lines. With a seasoned actor like Russell Crowe, these lines come off as just kind of oh, I see what he did there. And they're lines that make you kind of chuckle to yourself, because you don't want to be laughing out loud in this movie. This is supposed to be a scary horror movie. This is supposed to be a movie about demonic possession. This is a movie about exorcisms. So you don't want a bunch of laugh out loud jokes, but there was enough of these subtle little funny comments and quick quips from Russell Crowe as Father Gabriel that were delivered just beautifully, and all of these jokes really landed. At least for me, I spent my time I like what he just said there. That was kind of funny to myself, not laughing out loud, not disrupting the audience in the theater with me, but I liked those little kind of quick quip jokes that I think were written quite well, and I think beyond being written well, they were delivered expertly by Russell Crowe, which I think makes all the difference in the world. You can write really funny, one-liners, but if they're, like I said, in the wrong actor's hands, either are going to fall flat or they're just going to be too over the top and just take you out of the suspense and the thrill and the mystery and the horror of this horror movie. And I think Russell Crowe was really adept at delivering these funny lines in a way that was so nonchalant that it blended well. It didn't stand out, but it did give you those moments of levity where you can kind of laugh to yourself, and made the movie even more enjoyable than I felt it already was. Plus, I liked Russell Crowe's accent. I was a little worried when I heard he was going to be doing an Italian accent, because I thought it was going to be like Thor: Love and Thunder when he played Zeus, and he was doing this very over-the-top Italian accent. And I thought, oh, geez, it's going to be like that. But he was very adept at that as well. It was very... I've heard some people call it Olive Garden Italian. I don't know about that. I thought his accent was really good. I thought he played this character who was gregarious and very friendly, and like I said, it makes little funny quick quip jokes, kind of like somebody's grandfather. He very much had that feel to him, and I think with the accent he pulled off with the Italian, it felt like an old Italian priest that is just he's fun to be around. But when shit goes down, he gets serious, and when he's all done, he's pulling a flask out and taking a little nip just to take the edge off the nerves. But I ultimately really loved Russell Crowe's portrayal of Father Gabriel. Probably one of the things that I enjoyed most about this movie, for all the things this movie lacked, and it did lack in some things. It lacked in originality as far as exorcism movies go. It didn't break any mold of how exorcist movies are done. It lacked in those areas. It lacked in real surprises and real shock, because it was fairly formulaic when it came to all the things. Okay, this exorcism movie has to have this, and this. And it had all those things. But what those other movies didn't have is an actor the caliber of Russell Crowe. And I think that was probably one of the things that I enjoyed most about this. Another character and actor I really enjoyed is Father Escobal. He is a younger Spanish priest in the diocese that this castle or this abbey in Castile is, played by Daniel Zavato. And I really enjoyed him. If you're not familiar with him, he's been in a few things. I don't think I've seen any of the movies he's been in. He was in Don't Breathe, which that's a movie I've always wanted to watch. I just never did. He's done some TV. He was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fear the Walking Dead. He was in the Penny Dreadful City of Angels series, which I love the original Penny Dreadful series. Never watched the City of Angels series. Again, one of those things I always plan to watch, but don't. But I liked him. He is the kind of the apprentice in this scenario where you have Father Gabriel as the exorcism expert, and Father Escobal is the apprentice. He is a Catholic priest who has never done anything like an exorcism. He's just, he's your run-of-the-mill Catholic priest. And we find out that he does have a bit of a backstory, and he does have a bit of a secret. It's funny because when they talk before going in to start the process of exorcism with Henry, they have to be absolved of sin, and they have to be sinless before going into battle. And Father Gabriel asked Father Esquivel how long it's been since his last confession. He's like, 8 months. Father Gabriel's like, 8 months. But we find out he has a secret because the demon inside Henry brings that to light, and it sounds horrible. It sounds like he is one of these priests that is taking advantage of their position to take advantage of young girls in this case. And it wasn't that. We find out later an interesting backstory on him about how he fell in love, and falling in love with this girl who wanted him to leave the priesthood. He knew he could never leave the priesthood because his first love is God, and he told her he would to kind of lead her on. And that was, just to add some complication. It adds some complexity to this character, and another facet other than the wide-eyed innocent priest who's never done an exorcism before. It gave you reason to realize everybody is fallible, and everybody falls short and has a sin in one form or fashion or another. You realize that he's not this infallible priest that does nothing wrong. He has made mistakes, and the thing in this case where he owns up to it and he is repentant of it, I think was an interesting aspect of this character, and brought an interesting aspect to the story. And Daniel Zavato, I think, did a really good job with this character. I'm not really familiar with his work, but it's one of those performances where I'd like to see more of him. I'd like to check out some of the things I haven't watched with him in it. And finally, we're going to talk about the family real quick. There's the mother, Julia, played by Alex Esso, which I was really happy to see her. She's one of those actresses that I don't realize how much I enjoy them and how much of a fan I am of them. Of course, she was in 2015 Tales of Halloween in the Grim Grinning Ghost segment, which I love Tales of Halloween. Probably one of my favorite things to watch every time once we get into October and closer to Halloween. She played the version of Wendy Torrance in Dr. Sleep. And of course, she was in Midnight Mass, the Mike Flanagan miniseries on Netflix. She played Mildred Gunning, which I love the performance because she's playing an older woman, what she's supposed to be like in her 80s or something like that. And then she has dementia, and then she finally, got the old person makeup, and then finally backs off until she starts getting younger. It was really an interesting character and a performance I really liked of hers. She was also in Midnight Club as well, another Mike Flanagan one-off series for Netflix. But I really like Alex Esso, and I thought she played a really good job with this Julia character in The Pope's Exorcist, because the character we don't really we spend some time with this family, but we don't get to know much, and you have to really find out a lot about this family and who they are in a very short amount of time before the possession actually takes place. And I think Alex Esso does a really good job with Julia, the mother, in kind of delivering the exposition of who this family is, why they're in the position that they're in. She does it quite well. I mean, a lot of it is the writing, but a lot of it is the delivery, giving lines of exposition and making it feel natural and making it feel a part of real conversations is a really tough thing. Working in the world of advertising where I'm writing commercials and you're trying to give off this list of things the client wants to pass along to the listener and do it in a slice of life conversation to make it all sound natural. It's not an easy thing. And I see how that translates into film and TV, where you have lines of exposition that you really have to make feel natural. And part of that is writing, and part of that is the delivery of the talent. And I think Alex Esso does a really good job with getting this set up. She is a woman who her husband has died. Her and her family are trying to make it financially, and this is the only way they know how. She's uprooted her two children who are resenting her for this, and it's just, you see the pain that this woman is going through and that she is enduring and just trying to hold this family together. And after the possession, you get bits of that, her trying to hold her family together and do whatever it takes. And she doesn't get a lot of play after the beginning. Once Russell Crowe's character comes in and takes over, it is all about Father Gabriel. But you do get some little snippets of Julia and the strength of her trying to, like I said, fight to keep her family together. And Alex Esso does a really good job with that. The oldest daughter, Amy, is played by Laurel Marsden. Again, not an actress I'm terribly familiar with. I know she was in the Miss Marvel series on Disney Plus. And, I remember seeing her on that. But as far as that I don't really know much that she's done. But she kind of plays the bitchy older teenage girl. She is the one that is resenting her mother for bringing them all the way to Spain, uprooting her life. And she does that very well. And then later on, you don't get much of a development with the character, but you see her start to care more once shit goes down and trying to protect her brother and work with her mom to protect her brother. And you get some really interesting scenes with her where she is being terrorized by this demon and eventually taken over and possessed by the demon as well, because they tinker with the idea of multiple possessions, which is something that I haven't seen a lot of. It's usually just one kid's possessed. This doubled it to 2 kids possessed. And maybe the next one will have 3 kids possessed. Who knows? But nothing too terribly groundbreaking, but it was a little different. But I thought Laura Marsden did a good job with the Amy character because she had, once shit started going down with this, she had a lot to do as far as performance. And a lot of it dealt with the terror of being terrorized by this demon, being possessed by this demon herself. And, she kind of got the Linda Blair head twisting around scene, which I don't know as if it was done to as good of effect as The Exorcist. But it was still, it worked, and it was creepy. Even though I'd seen it before, I saw it coming, and it still worked, even though I did see it coming. And then, of course, the Henry character, Peter D'Souza Fanny as Henry, he didn't have a lot of lines because his whole thing is he witnessed his father impaled by a piece of wrought iron or something in this car accident and saw his father die. So when we meet him at the beginning of this, he hasn't spoken a word in the last year since his father's death. And, it's a weird relationship between him and his mother. His mother just wants him to talk, and you get a little bit of that. But then he becomes possessed, and most all of his performance is in the way he expresses himself facially before the possession, but especially after the possession, because you get him having to emote with his face, and you do get some, he finally does talk some in this and deliver lines where they do a bit of a voiceover or a layering effect with another actor, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I thought he really did a good job with that. You had a lot of great prosthetic work on him. I think they did a bit of prosthetics kind of intermingled with some digital effects. I thought it all really worked. I liked that they did some very practical work in the special effects department, whether it be with the possession look of Henry, whether it be practical blood, things like that. I thought they did a really good job with those elements. And a thing I really loved about this movie is the demon's voice, and not really not a physical performance, but definitely a vocal performance. Ralph Ineson, who, this guy has done just about everything. He's been in Harry Potter. He was in Game of Thrones. Unfortunate for him, he was in that abysmal Willow series on Disney Plus. The guy's been all over the place. And of course, he's in the original British version of The Office. He plays the Todd Packer style character. Chris Finch, he's also in one of my favorite movies, From Hell. Just a wonderful actor and a great voice, a very iconic, maybe not iconic voice, I don't know, but he's one of those voices definitely that you hear it and you're like, I know that voice from somewhere. Where do I know that voice? And I spent the whole movie thinking that anytime that the Henry character had lines that he delivered with this demonic voice coming out, Ralph Ineson's voice, I was just like, I know that voice. Where do I know that voice? And he did a really good job, but he's got such a gravelly voice that it played well into this demonic character. But yeah, those are the main characters, and that's kind of their place in this story. Once Father Gabriel gets to the Abbey in Castile, Spain, it really plays out like part and parcel a Exorcist story, and also a bit of a mystery as to why, who this demon is and why they're torturing Henry. And they find out the demon it's a name you've heard probably tossed about. I know they've mentioned this in Supernatural. I think this was one of the demons in Supernatural. I believe they talked about this in Good Omens. If you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan and play the game Neverwinter, or if you've done any of the campaigns that have to do with cults and stuff like that, Asmodeus is the name of this demon, and it's a mystery to find out the name of the demon, because in almost all demonic lore, if you know the name of the demon, if you can get the name of the demon or get it to tell you its name, it has less power. It's something that has been played into before with several exorcism movies, but they find out that the demon involved is the king of hell, Asmodeus. In finding that out, there is a really interesting subplot where they're going to this bit of walled off area underneath this abbey, this former abbey, where you go into this cave system, and it really delves into the Spanish Inquisition. And I think alongside of the bit with Father Gabriel, where the young woman that he didn't help but could have, and she ended up killing herself because she had been raped or molested or had something sexual done to her by a priest. And it delved into the problems that the Catholic Church has with priests who are touching people and doing things to people, especially young people. Where they delved into that, they really delved into another kind of shame of the Catholic Church, the Spanish Inquisition. And I think even more so, you can chalk this up to the Spanish Inquisition. You can chalk this up to maybe the witch hunts in Salem, and witch hunts, Salem's not the only one that did witch hunts back in those days. I mean, they were all over the world, but they talked about this abbot in the Catholic Church, how he was actually possessed by Asmodeus and infiltrated the Catholic Church, and he is the one that convinced the Queen of Spain to set the Inquisition in motion, and talking about how the devil infiltrates Catholicism or infiltrates any faith through people who sow dissent and who sow poison into and wreck the goodness of any faith. And I really enjoyed that kind of subplot. It wasn't over the top, it wasn't preachy, but it kind of gave you a little bit of light into the fact that, the Inquisition, some horrible things happened. People were tortured because of the Spanish Inquisition, and how the thought that in this world that a demon possessed person in the Catholic Church kind of spearheaded that. It's a fantastical and supernatural explanation for just somebody that really didn't have a good heart in the Catholic Church, spearheaded the Inquisition and things like that. that caused so much pain to people, spearheaded by people that really didn't have the kind of faith and the kind of love and the kind of belief that that a Christian should, or that any good person should. People that really had evil on their heart, whether they're demon possessed or not, they infiltrate into good circles and can poison the lot just by sowing the seeds of dissent and make people think that this is the right thing to do when it's not. And I could get into a whole big thing here. I'm trying not to make this preachy or religious, but it was a really interesting way to kind of delve into particular questions about the way that Christians have acted in the past in the name of God, but not doing things that God would approve of. And I really loved that aspect of this. One of those movies that really make you think about things, aside from just the horror and the gore and the mystery and the fun of a scary movie, that make you think without telling you what to think. It really kind of brings forth some of those ideas and makes you think about, hey, you know what, that's true. Maybe things happen this way because of this or because of that. But aside from the themes like that, I really did enjoy this movie because while it wasn't terribly scary, I wouldn't say there's maybe a couple jump scares, which I didn't mind. It was all well within the story being told. It wasn't no fake jump scares or anything like that. It was all within the context of the story. I felt several moments where my heart was racing a little bit, and it was very tense and intense, and I liked it scary and creepy in that regard. There wasn't anything terribly horrific that was presented. Nothing that's going to make me stay up at night. Nothing that's going to make me wonder about what's lurking in my closet or what's lurking under the bed. Nothing scary like that. That's really kind of what I want. I want something that's going to make me scared to go out in the middle of the night in the dark or walk into a dark room or things like that. I haven't had that in a long while, and this movie didn't give me that, but it did have a lot of tense moments. It really built on tension quite well. I thought the stakes were enough to where, I got anxious about how this was going to end, even though I knew it was probably going to end with a happy ending, and it did. It didn't disappoint there. It gave me exactly what I thought I was going to get, which maybe I would like, in some regard, a little subversion of expectation. There were no twists and turns other than, like I said, the revelations within the Catholic Church that were kind of presented about the Inquisition, about priests, touching kids, stuff like that. You had a lot of the typical things, like I said, people walking on all fours, heads twisting around, projectile vomiting. You had, people floating in the air. You had all that regular stuff. They did do one thing that I thought was really cool. When Father Gabriel is first interviewing Henry, he has this medallion that he, is moving around in front of Henry's eyes. And he does this with the young man who's not really possessed, but he's kind of going through the motions of possession earlier. And you realize why he's doing it, because Henry's eyes are looking off one way, but as he moves the medallion, you see these this glowing yellow iris move out from behind Henry's own physical iris. And it was creepy, and it was a great effect. I really love that. I don't think that's even at the time, I'm like, oh, I don't think I've ever seen that in an exorcism movie. I really liked that. That was probably one of the few really original things that they did that I quite enjoyed. And as a movie goes, even though you had an exorcism movie that played into a lot of the same tropes, you saw a lot of the same things you've seen in other exorcism movies. It was beautifully shot and beautifully directed. I have to give props to Julius Avery, who is not, he's not a director that you see a ton of stuff from. He did Overlord, which was really good in 2018. He did Samaritan that was last year, the Amazon Prime movie. It was a superhero movie, but it was it was an interesting take on superheroes. I enjoyed it with Sylvester Stallone, and I thought that was pretty good. And then he's done Pope's Exorcist, so he has done a ton of stuff, but he's a director that has done good enough movies. In the few movies that he's done that I've watched, he's good enough that I want to see more from him. I wish he would do more, because I think, well, you hone your craft by doing more. And I think for the most part, I think he does a good job with the movies that I've seen him do. And to think that he could just get better with more movies under his belt, I think, he has the potential to do some really amazing work down the road. But at any rate, I really loved what he did with this movie because there was a lot of interesting angles. They did some very interesting camera work. I loved when Father Gabriel was riding his little Vespa up to the Abbey in Castile, Spain. I just thought there was some neat shots. There was some beautiful cinematography of the Vatican and of the Spanish countryside. I thought some of the shots were really amazing. I liked the direction of the movie. I thought the pace was pretty good for an hour and 40. Yeah, it was probably just a shade under an hour and 45 minutes. I thought the movie moved along pretty quick. I mean, they got right into it, introducing the characters. Father Gabriel were introduced, and he's going right into an exorcism. The family that we meet, we meet them, we get a sense of who they are, we get a sense of why we should care about them, and then we're right into Henry being possessed. And they don't waste a lot of time getting the Father Gabriel character to Spain. The movie moved along at a pretty good pace. It never once felt slow and boring. I never once felt like, oh God, this is dragging out. When it was all said and done, I never felt like, oh, that was all of an hour and 45 minutes. I never felt like that at all. So it moved along at a pretty good clip. And that, I think, helped make it enjoyable. I think one of the biggest problems I had with this movie is kind of in the writing, not in the dialogue and the story, because I thought the story was really good. I thought the story had some interesting ideas. I thought the dialogue was really good, especially the dialogue between Father Gabriel and Father Escobal. I thought the dialogue was good. I think where this movie kind of faltered in the writing, and I have to give some credit to the writers. A couple of well-known writers. I mean, you've seen movies they've done. Michael Petroni has done Queen of the Damned, Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, another possession movie, The Rite with Anthony Hopkins, another possession movie that I was expecting to be more scary than it actually was, but he was one of the writers on this. Evan Spiliotopoulos, I'm probably butchering his name, but also has done several things, including the Beauty and the Beast live action movie, the 2019 Charlie's Angels, and a movie I really liked with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, The Unholy, which came out in 2021. A movie I really enjoyed. So a couple writers that have got some, so they've got some accomplishments. And like I said, I don't think the story was bad. I don't think the writing was bad in the, like I said, dialogue and storytelling. I think where this movie kind of faltered a little bit is in kind of the change of tone. First, you've got a possession movie that, plays like a stereotypical exorcism movie. And in that, you don't really do anything different. And I think that was a problem with this, is that there was no new ground tread with how an exorcism movie should go. And that was kind of, I could live with that because, like I said, the performances were really good. There were aspects to the story that were a little different that I hadn't quite seen before. Visually, we saw, a couple little things, the whole thing with the eyes and stuff that we hadn't seen before. I can get past the fact that this plays out like every other exorcism movie that we've seen. And I don't like it. I want something different. I want something new and something that kind of sets the bar again. But we haven't gotten that yet. And the fact that we didn't get it with this shouldn't be a huge disappointment because, hey, you know what? Nobody else is doing anything different either. I guess the problem I have is you set this up like a traditional exorcism story, and it does have some creepiness. It doesn't have a lot of great scares, but it does have some creepiness and then some atmosphere. And you set up this mystery that was kind of interesting and had some plot points that were kind of different to a degree. But then all of a sudden, the end of this movie, and I liked the end of the movie, but it just felt like two different movies. It felt like an exorcism movie, and then it kind of changed into an action horror adventure. Almost felt like a Marvel ending to a traditional possession exorcism movie. I still enjoyed it. I liked it. It felt very buddy cop in a way at the end with the two priests, but it felt like a different movie, that climax as opposed to the rest of the movie we had leading up to it. I enjoyed it, but it just felt a little off. And ultimately, the performances, I think, are what made this movie well worth the watch. You're not going to find anything groundbreaking in the way of exorcism movies. I'd liken this to kind of elements of Pray for the Devil, which we saw last year or earlier this year. Pray for the Devil and The Exorcism of God, which I thought was a really good movie. And an exorcism movie that, like I said, you're not finding anything new. They're not breaking the mold. But I thought the idea was kind of unique as far as what happens in that movie. Unfortunately, I didn't watch that in time to really get an episode out when it was fresh and new, but a movie I really loved. If you like exorcism movies, I thought it had an interesting enough twist to make it a little bit different from the rest of the pack. And I think that's what you get with the Pope's Exorcist. It's a little bit different. Like I said, it has elements of Pray for the Devil. It has elements of The Exorcism of God, but it also has enough to make it just unique enough to make it a little bit different story-wise than some of the other exorcism movies. As far as the exorcism itself goes, as far as the possession stuff goes, nothing new under the sun with this. And I really hope one day we do get an exorcism movie that really kind of takes the mold, smashes it, and throws it out, and just shows us something we have never seen before. I'm really hoping for that. But until then, this was a good enough movie that it was an enjoyable watch. And like I said, if just for Russell Crowe's performance by itself, it's well worth the watch, because this is one of those movies. This is one of those performances where he's doing a horror movie and he could have just phoned it in, but by God, he's acting his ass off in this. And this movie really shows why Russell Crowe, for all the grief he gets sometimes, Russell Crowe, this movie shows why he is a fantastic actor. And well worth the watch just to see his performance. And the effects were really good too. I mean, they did a nice combination of practical effects and digital effects, some CG effects, a lot of CG enhancing, practical effect makeup and things of that nature. I really enjoyed the effort they put into that. Of course, some of the corpses we see later, some cool, dead prosthetics and bodies and whatnot that I think they did a really good job. The props department really made this whole abbey look old and ancient and well worn and well used over the centuries. And then, of course, when you kind of get down into those catacombs, it looked dank and dingy and musty and cobweb filled, and all of the bodies interred there are creepy and old, and it looked really good. Visually, from a cinematography standpoint, it looked great, and from a props and, like I said, the practical effects enhanced by some digital effects. There's some digital CG work in there, but it's not bad. There towards the end, like I said, that finale when it gets kind of marvelly and fantastical. Some of the CG work there is not the best I've ever seen, but it's certainly not the worst I've ever seen. So I'm glad I watched it. It's a movie that I might even give it one more watch. Once it comes out on streaming, I might even watch it again to see if I missed anything. But not a movie I'm going to watch a ton of times. Not a movie like I'm going to watch over and over again, like The Exorcist or Exorcist 3 or The Exorcism of Emily Rose or things like that. Kind of the exorcism movies that really got it right. But this is a movie I wouldn't mind seeing again because I did enjoy Russell Crowe's performance and the performance of all the actors in this that much. That made this movie. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on The Pope's Exorcist. Check it out. It's in movie theaters now. If you're catching this episode later, look for it on streaming because it's definitely not going to be your favorite exorcism movie. It's not going to be the greatest exorcism movie of all times. It's not going to show you anything you probably haven't seen before, but it is going to be an enjoyable watch. I can tell you that much. So check it out if you get a chance, and check out more about what's going on with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm always posting what's going on, what episodes we've got coming up on Facebook. I share articles and trailers to the horror, fantasy, and science fiction that you know and love. And check us out, as I said, on Instagram. And no matter where you listen to this podcast, please follow it, like it, subscribe to it, whatever you're going to do on whatever platform you happen to be listening to it on. Leave a review. 5 stars will be awesome. But whatever review you leave, we do appreciate that. And share it with anyone that you know that loves good genre stuff, horror, fantasy, and science fiction. Share it and get the word out about our podcast. And until next time. Thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop.